me to the punch. That has not happened, not because the material isn't out there, but possibly because other people are not looking for it, due to Bismarck exerting a peculiar hold on authors' imaginations and motivations. Other people are perhaps not interested in looking for unpublished British eyewitness accounts. The Royal Navy's ships and the achievements of their men do not necessarily interest them to the same extent as Bismarck, nor do the full eyewitness accounts of the British aviators from HMS Ark Royal's squadrons, who delivered the fatal blow to Bismarck's steering. Their exploits, like much else in the story, are well known, but it is the fine detail, the human element, that is missing in many cases. I am proud to say that there is plenty of fresh material here, but the reality of what happened on the British side out there in the Atlantic in 1941, as presented in the following pages, is perhaps somewhat more heroic and horrific than some, though not all, earlier accounts would have us believe. Heroic, in that the Royal Navy's men had to contend with old ships and obsolete aircraft operating in extreme sea conditions, with only the benefit of early radar to bolster their extraordinary seamanship, bravery, and fortitude. I hope my account is also honest, too, in revealing the necessary brutality of the Bismarck episode's finale, and the fact that a major motivating factor for the British sailors and Marines was revenge for the murder of 1,415 of their shipmates on Hood. It is fashionable to place a modern, touchy-feely slant on significant events such as those covered in this book, to rewrite people's motivation and censor their darker feelings. What veterans felt after the war, with the softening of old enmities, is sometimes allowed to replace the way they really felt during hostilities. The reality is that avenging Hood was probably the major driver for those involved on the British side. They had known Hood as a feature of their lives since boyhood, and once they joined the Navy, either served in her or had friends who were members of the battlecruiser's ship's company, many of them dying at the hands of Bismarck. The pursuit and destruction of Bismarck was therefore an extremely personal endeavor for the men of the Royal Navy. Sympathy for the German battleship's survivors came after the guns were silent. Killing the Bismarck was a horrific and disgusting business, which might explain why a number of those on the British side decided not to make too much of it. Like any rational and right-thinking human beings, the individuals involved were possibly ashamed of what they were forced to do, in order to ensure their nation's survival during its darkest hour, as it fought on alone against the Nazis. They did not wish to revisit those baser instincts, those acts of desperate necessity, in detail at a later date. However, not to reveal the full scale of the brutal business of war at sea is to help foster the illusion that it is a long-range, remote, almost bloodless affair, a tale of machines rather than men. The images of Bismarck lying on the seabed that have been obtained by expeditions to investigate her wreck in recent years do not convey the sheer horror of her end. The smoke, flames, blood, and gore have all long gone, leaving only a punctured, pitted shell. This author once received a letter from a Bismarck enthusiast claiming his beloved battleship was still intact on the seabed, and had therefore gloriously outlived Rodney, which, so he crowed in screaming capitals, had been turned into razor blades after the war. Such bizarre reasoning sees warships merely as metal constructs, rather than living, breathing communities afloat that, once the flesh and blood contained within has been eviscerated, no longer exist. Not to lay bare the brutality of the final battle, as well the raw horror of other moments, such as Hood's loss, undermines the courage in the face of adversity shown by ordinary men plunged into extraordinary circumstances, on both sides. To lay out the story as if it was a gigantic game of chess would especially betray the incredible courage of the Royal Navy's ships and men, for the weather was as serious a foe as the enemy. Just finding and hanging on to business.